genius of the mind. So many stories to unwind.
Welcome to the Writer's Bog. In this video, we're going to talk about the 4 pillars of storytelling. I don't see many people bringing them up, and while you don't have to know more than a basic summary of what the 4 pillars are, just knowing they're a thing can help subconsciously as you start working on your story. What are the 4 pillars? I'll tell you what each of them are in a second, but first I'm going to tell you why they're called the 4 pillars. Every story is built by these 4 things. If a story is missing even one of them, it's not a story. It really can't be. Getting rid of one of the pillars would be like getting rid of cinematography for a movie. You can't. It's part of the definition. It's important to know that before you learn what the pillars are, because when you first hear them, you might think, oh, my story doesn't need that one. And if you think that, you're wrong. But I'll explain that in a bit too. The 4 pillars of storytelling, in no particular order, are plot, theme, world building, and character. I'll break each of them down individually to show you why they're all important. Plot is probably the easiest to explain and understand why it's necessary for a story. The Cambridge Dictionary describes the word plot as the story of a book, film, play, etc. Now, a lot of writers don't actually agree that plot and story are the same thing, so for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to give a slightly different definition. The plot of a story is a list of events that happen in a story. It's like the foundation for the story, but really you can't have a story that's only plot, because you need characters to incite the events, you need a world for the events to happen in, and most vaguely, but also most importantly, you need a theme for the events to feel like they actually make sense, or matter, or mean anything. Character is also a pretty easy one. You need characters in a story to make things happen. To appeal to the artsy-fartsy types and the contrarians, I'll grant that characters don't necessarily need to be actual people or creatures to be considered characters. But that's a massive concept that I'm not going to get into right now, because I doubt 99% of new writers would give a shit. So again, for the sake of simplicity, characters are generally the ones who control the plot, as in their personalities are one of the aspects that can draw readers into a plot, and then their actions are usually what end up advancing the plot. Really, I don't think I need to explain much more about characters than that. World building isn't nearly as complicated a topic as theme, but there's quite a big problem that a lot of writers, and not just new writers, have when it comes to world building. When they hear the word world building, they imagine a fantasy or a sci-fi story with a bunch of magic or space lasers and kingdoms and dystopian governments and gods and black holes. People who write contemporary stuff don't seem to realize just how important world building is in every book, regardless of the genre. Which, though it might sound lame now, I actually think world building grounded in realistic settings is just as fun and cool as world building for fantasy and sci-fi. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Every story has world building. Not just the Tolkien-esque epics, but even the story set in a modern-day small town. World building isn't just coming up with who's in charge of a political faction or the location of this building versus that building. It's also about setting a tone. You could have 2 stories set in the same place, but the way they explain the place that they're set in can vary drastically. A rom-com set in a city might show the city's vibrant, unique locations through dates and breakups, and might give the city a vibe of hope and creativity, while the thriller set in the same city might show the criminal underground with an aura of danger and hopelessness. But another fun thing you can do with a world building isn't just getting the world across to the reader. It's using the main character's view of the world to shape the world building. These are all things worth thinking about, and that's not a bad thing. It can be a lot of fun, and good world building, even if it's set in a mundane world, can add so much depth and personality to your story. Theme is the most complicated of the 4 pillars of storytelling, partly because it's the most vague and abstract, and also because, again, a lot of writers have different opinions on what the term theme actually means and encompasses. But again, for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to give you a definition that should work for the most part, for now. Essentially, the theme of a story is the point of a story. The theme is the message you're trying to convey to your readers through your story. A generic and simple example would be that the theme of most revenge stories is that revenge is bad. Even though it's more abstract and complicated than the other pillars of storytelling, having a theme for your story is just as important. A story without a point is not a story at all. And I think that's enough for one day. Thanks for watching. Next video will be about how to finally start writing your first page for people who already have an idea for a story in mind. I think the video after that, though, might be about different ways to come up with new stories for people who want to write something but don't really know what to write about. Hope to see you there.